Hi, my name is Tony Van Veen, CEO of Discmakers. As a musician, you've probably heard talk of producer points, something along the line of, as a producer, I want 4 points on that recording. Have you ever wondered, what does that even mean, and how does that work? Well, over the next 3 weeks starting today, I will be diving into that question. I'll explain what points are, how they work, when a producer should get points, and whether and when a producer may also be entitled to a songwriter split of your song that they just produced. Today, however, I'm going to start with a basic question. What is actually the difference between a recording engineer and a producer, and where does the executive producer come into the picture? Now, my personal experience might not be too different from what you experienced as an independent artist. You see, way back in the day, when I went into the studio with my band, we had our songs, we liked them, we were broke, and we were ignorant. And so the studio came with an engineer, and the engineer ended up recording our album and mixing it. And we took that mix, that master, and we sent it to a pressing plant, and we got our records pressed. And it was fine, but it may not have led to the best sounding album possible. You see, we couldn't afford a producer, and frankly, the thought of a producer never even really crossed our mind. So what's the difference between an engineer and a producer, you ask? Well, the main difference is that while both the producer and the engineer have a healthy understanding of the technical aspects of music production, producers also have an added level of artistic and creative vision to make a recording the best it can be. As such, while many music producers are also good sound engineers don't necessarily make the best producers. Your recording engineer is a technician. They set up the studio and the recording equipment, they operate the soundboard, they operate other equipment during the recording sessions. If you have a producer, the engineer works under the supervision of that producer. Their main job is to use their technical skills to make sure that the producers and the artist's vision come to fruition. They're also often responsible for mixing the recorded tracks. A producer really is the creative leader of a recording session or an album. He or she, but for better or worse in this business, usually he, is in charge of the overall recording, of the sound, of the vibe. And as such, the producer may actually completely rearrange some songs. They'll coach musicians on how to play on a track. They'll help artists pick which songs to put on the album. They'll sometimes mix the recordings, not always. Sometimes the engineer does that. They'll decide the sequence of the album tracks. Maybe they'll even play an instrument or contribute sounds to a recording. In fact, depending on the genre, producers may do less or more. In hip-hop, the producer may, create the beat, or in many cases, create the complete musical track that the artist will be rapping over. Heck, if you're somebody like Rick Rubin, a producer may even play psychologist with the band members during the recording session. In short, the producer is a super important creative contributor to the end recording. So what does an exec producer do then? Well, in my experience, while the executive producer can sometimes perform some of the producer functions, they usually have more of a financial and administrative role. They'll oversee the recording budget, they'll hire session players, they'll secure funding for the recording. In other words, on most indie recordings, when you see the credit for exec producer, it's probably the person who paid for the project. So there you have it. Hopefully I've clarified the difference between an engineer, a producer, and an exec producer. In my next video, I'll be discussing whether and when your producer deserves points, what that means, how it works, and how many they may be entitled to, and also how that translates into dollars. See you then.